third-party devs are actually going to need Nintendo this time with the Nintendo Switch 2. And there are 4 key points that I want to talk about: how the dynamics, the change in the environment, what's going on in multiple different regions, and exactly what the hardware is of the Nintendo Switch is the reason why third-party developers are going to need this system, and it's going to be a very different generation than what we've seen in the past when it comes to third-party support and the Nintendo Switch. But before we get into all of that, what's good everyone? OJ here. Welcome back to another video. Please make sure you hit that like button, subscribe if you are someone new, and click that notification bell to get my videos as soon as they drop. Now let's go ahead and jump right into this because I find it to be very fascinating when it comes to what Nintendo is doing and how the market has changed so much, even from just about 7-8 years ago when the Nintendo Switch first launched. Now, if you look at the dynamics of the Nintendo Switch launch, the Nintendo Switch 1 versus the Nintendo Switch 2 launch, there are so many things different. So many things have changed. If you look at the Nintendo Switch 1 and the fact that it was able to sell over 150 million consoles, and it could be ultimately the best selling system of all time, that is a major change in terms of how third-party developers are looking at Nintendo. The dynamics of that in the first place, the fact that you can sit there and say, wow, there is an install base of 150 million of people that can buy these games, and obviously there are people with multiple systems, but it's 100+ million. The active user base is well into the 100 millions of people that actually turn on their system and play games. That is a huge centerpiece for any third-party developer that wants to say, okay, there are so many people that actually know what Nintendo's ecosystem is, have the device, whatever the case is, and I can sell my games to those people. That is a big turning point in the difference between when the Nintendo Switch launched versus the Nintendo Switch 2, because back when the Nintendo Switch 1 launched, it was crazy. There was really no real install base. The Wii U had pretty much flopped out. There wasn't a ton of people playing games on there. The Nintendo 3DS absolutely had a pretty solid base of people playing, but with the, I would say, hardware potential or hardware power of the Nintendo 3DS, a lot of major third-party developers didn't have a, I would say, confidence in that system or in the people playing that system in order to say, okay, let's put games on the next thing, because it was always known that the Nintendo Switch was a successor to the Wii U in addition to the Nintendo 3DS, because Nintendo did combine their home console and portable R&D division. So we all already knew that, yeah, it was the successor to both of them. It was a portable and a home console all put into one, but third-party developers did not see the 3DS base as anything to really support overall. It wasn't like there was a ton of Western games where the developers made these off little shoot games and said, hey, okay, let's make Mass Effect for the Nintendo 3DS, and it's a completely different type of game, or let's make Tony Hawk like they used to do for the Game Boy Advance, or let's make Call of Duty for the Nintendo 3DS. They didn't do that. They didn't even care because they didn't think that base was even worth putting a lot of games on. So essentially the Nintendo 3DS became a device where it was supported by Nintendo's first party and Japanese developers here and there, but there was no dynamics of third-party developers, major third-party developers, being excited about the Nintendo Switch because of the audiences of the 3DS and because of the flop of the Wii U. So the different dynamics between going into the launch of the Nintendo Switch 1 versus the Nintendo Switch 2 is a massive difference, and why third-party developers are going to support this system compared to what we saw. Now, when I say third-party developers, I'm definitely leaning more towards the big AAA Western developers over independent developers and over Japanese developers, but I am including big AAA Japanese developers that necessarily did not feel that the Nintendo Switch was going to be big at first. Bandai Namco and many other developers did point out, like, hey, we messed up. We didn't get on the wagon fast enough. You know, we have to actually look at these things, and we were wrong on that, and we tried to adjust mid-generation. Now, the next big key point why third-party developers need the Nintendo Switch and things are going to be different, it's that there is a problem with PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series. There is a lack of growth, and that is an issue. Now, on the PlayStation 5 front, that's pretty much the de facto default, hey, we've got to put games on this system, and I 100% agree with that. I think games should always come to any system that it can. I 100% agree with that PS5 is doing really good, and third-party developers are making money and doing well on PS5. Obviously, PC, they are putting their games on there, and depending on what type of game you have, it can do really well or it can't. It just depends. Like, that's just how the market is. Xbox Series, it's a little bit different, but the big key point here is the fact that the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series, they're not necessarily exponentially growing. The PlayStation 5 is tracking right around where the PS4 is tracking or so. Sometimes it's a bit better, sometimes it's not, depending on like what's happening at this point. But from what I last heard, it was tracking a little bit behind PlayStation 4 when it comes to worldwide. Now that might have changed with the launch of the PS5 Pro and the extra boost that they got there. So we'll have to wait and see and kind of compare the numbers, but it's not like it's blowing out the PlayStation 4. It's not like it's massively growing past what we've seen before. And that's going to come into a key factor with my next point. So stay with me on that one, guys. Now the Xbox Series, it is tracking way less than the Xbox One, and that is a huge problem. That lack of growth, not only a little bit with the PlayStation 5, but I would say it's even a bigger issue with the Xbox Series, because in the past, with the Xbox 360, with the Xbox One, developers could probably, I would say, count on Microsoft a bit more when it came to game sales, which is a huge factor when it comes to third-party developers. They need to sell games, they need to make money. It's a capitalistic business. And with the Xbox Series lack of growth and being so far behind the Xbox One, that has created a massive hole and a problem. And if you look at even how Microsoft operates at this point, I know Phil Spencer will come out and say they're selling more games than ever and all of that, but he doesn't really provide any numbers to back things up and the price that they're selling for and everything. Like, it's really, I would say, shrouded in mystery, because they don't give sales numbers. They don't give sales numbers of games or of the system itself. So that's the main issue there. And if you look at it, the Game Pass situation is a problem for a lot of developers, and some third-party developers have spoke out against that. And big third-party developers have spoke out against, yeah, we're not so sure about this Game Pass thing, and it does affect the sales. Developers want to be able to sell their games full price, premium price or full price, or sell their games and not have to worry about getting little kickbacks on a subscription service. Now, if you can get your game on there and it helps pay for development and everything, then that's great. There are some developers that are going to love that deal, but most developers probably don't want to be on a subscription service. They want to sell their game and make money off of it that way, because you're going to make more off of that than being on a subscription service. And Microsoft can't even afford to pay every single developer for Game Pass. They're not going to have 1 billion games in there. So Game Pass, combined with the lack of growth of the sales for the Xbox Series, and somewhat to a smaller degree with the PlayStation 5, is another reason why many third-party developers actually need the Nintendo Switch 2. Because if you look at it, the Nintendo Switch sold 150 million plus. Many of those games were premium price type of titles. There's a lot of shovelware and stupid stuff on there, but many big games that did come to the platform actually sold 1 million units plus of a premium or somewhat premium price. If you're looking at games like Skyrim, Doom, The Witcher 3, Persona, a lot of these big AAA games that came over actually ended up selling really well and doing good for the developers out there. So with the Nintendo Switch 2, they're definitely looking to say, okay, we know that there are people that are going to buy our games if we put them on there, so we absolutely need to get things ready and support the system, considering what's happening with the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series, especially Xbox's lack of growth and the whole Game Pass situation. We want to be able to sell our games when it comes to the price and somewhat near full price, or we can do discounts and sales here and there, but the whole Game Pass thing is hitting some of our sales. That's why you see a lot of the times the Xbox Series is behind PlayStation 5 and even the Nintendo Switch in the actual sales department of games. If you look at the different sales charts and they break down the splits of where the game sales are because of the Game Pass factor. So I do think that the lack of the massive growth when it comes to console sales, when it comes to some of the game sales, is the reason why third-party developers need the Nintendo Switch 2. Now, the next key point here, guys, is the game development prices are skyrocketing, and this is something that I alluded to when it comes down to it. Without that massive growth, that's going to be a problem, especially when prices are getting higher. So prices are getting higher, but necessarily game sales aren't getting significantly higher. That's going to create a deficit, and that's going to be a problem. they absolutely need more return on investment. If the Nintendo Switch 2 can come in and sell a lot of systems, that gives them kind of like instant juice off the bench, right? Instant like sixth man when it comes to like basketball or something like that. You can bring someone in that can instantly get you some offense, instantly get you sales, and the Nintendo Switch 2 is positioned to do that like it did for the developers who supported the Nintendo Switch 1 at launch. The ones that were there, they got a surprising, I would say, amount of money to flow in because people weren't expecting the Nintendo Switch when it comes to big third-party games or anything, or even just in general. People weren't expecting the Nintendo Switch to do so well, but when it did, people started making money hand over fist, and it was great because Nintendo Switch 1 development isn't anywhere near as pricey as it is for Xbox and PlayStation, considering the difference in what those systems were doing. So they did make a ton of money off of that. So I do feel that this time they're going to be ready for it. Because of the skyrocketing game development price, you need more return on your original code or investment for that game. So of course, if you can bring in a system that is capable and can do what the Nintendo Switch did, and if they can have even a fraction of that success starting out and going forward, that's going to be huge for so many game developers out there. That's going to be huge for so many AAA game developers out there because the price is skyrocketing and they do need more of that back. So the Nintendo Switch 2 is going to provide them with that, supplementing what they already have on PC, PlayStation, or Xbox. Now, the last point here is definitely one of the key points overall when people talk about the system, and that third-party developers need it because the Nintendo Switch 2 is finally going to be a system that's far more capable than Nintendo has ever had. If you're looking at what's going on here, the beginning tech that they used with the Tegra X1, that was the start, the genesis of being able to have the type of games that can run, like, let's say, better than PlayStation 3, Xbox 360, somewhat near maybe on the bottom range in terms of Xbox One and PlayStation 4, and being able to get games like Doom Eternal, for example, right? Very demanding game overall in terms of how it runs and everything, and still, you got to do some crazy stuff, but they're getting it to work when it comes to the Nintendo Switch, and that was rough for a lot of developers out there. It was very rough. It was hard because of how the Nintendo Switch was put together, obviously the RAM and all of that, but developers found ways. Stuff like Nier Automata, that actually was pretty good on the Nintendo Switch. There were some things that were not so good, and with varying levels of success overall, but I think at the end of the day, there was some pretty good stuff that developers brought out. Now you're fast forwarding all the way. There is a lot of new technology. NVIDIA has advanced their hardware so much better at this point. You have the really cool thing when it comes to DLSS and technology that was not available back in 2015, 2016, 2017 when Nintendo was preparing the Nintendo Switch 1 to get to developers' hands for dev kits. Now at this point, with the so much better architecture and so much better, I would say, NVIDIA mobile chips, you're able to do so much more for an efficient and decent price in terms of keeping things down. And that's where the Nintendo Switch with Nintendo and their engineers and what they're doing with NVIDIA have came together to put together the Nintendo Switch 2 that's going to have hardware that isn't, oh my gosh, this is a PlayStation 5 Pro anything. Obviously, it's not going to be able to do that for a probable $400 or so price system, but it's going to be able to be way more capable than what the Nintendo Switch one when it comes to bringing over these bigger AAA type of games. So we are going to get better ports, and it's going to be something to where it'll be able to handle these games going forward better, in my opinion, at least from what I'm seeing, better than what the Nintendo Switch 1 was able to do when it launched versus PlayStation 4 versus the Xbox One, and with the then incoming PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series. Now we do have to wait and see what the Xbox Series 2 or the Xbox whatever they're going to do next box is going to do in addition to the PlayStation 6, but I do feel that even if those systems come out and they're so much more powerful and everything, there is no chance, considering what's going on right now with the lack of sales and everything, there is no chance that these developers drop the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series S and X. There's no chance that they do that, because there's just simply not enough systems to do that. And you don't know what the game development in terms of hardware adoption rate is going to be even then. So if you're launching systems in 2026 and 2027 or 2027, they're not going to drop the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series. Very similar to how people simply aren't dropping the PlayStation 4 at this point. We still have brand new games coming to PlayStation 4. Now it's tapered off, but there was a lot of support for PlayStation 4 and the Xbox One many years into the Xbox Series and PlayStation 5's life. There's no way that they can, because they need those systems, because they have the install base, and I think by then the Nintendo Switch 2 is going to have a pretty sizable install base, plus the game engine scale. There's a lot of different factors going forward, but this time around it's very different because of what's happening with the whole industry. Now, one more bonus point that I want to put out is that if you're looking at it from a third-party Japanese standpoint, that is going to be almost all when it comes to adoption rate. It needs to be 95% plus. Now, there will probably be some games that are only PlayStation for a deal or whatever, the China Hero games or certain stuff like that. But if you're looking at Asian developers, and more specifically Japanese developers, and the traditional big Japanese developers from Bandai Namco and Capcom and Koei Tecmo and all of them, they are pretty much all going to be on the Nintendo Switch 2 and absolutely need the hardware. If you've taken one peep, all you got to do is just take one peep at a couple different weeks of the Famitsu sales, and you will see that the Nintendo Switch 1, with its old crusty hardware still at this point, is still dominating PlayStation and Xbox easily in Japan, and the top 30 titles are almost all Nintendo Switch titles. Some weeks it's all Nintendo Switch first and third party titles, and the Nintendo Switch 1 is still outselling everything else considerably. So that momentum, that I would say change, is so different from the dynamics of when the Nintendo Switch 1 first started. And if you look at the Famitsu sales then, there was a mix of PlayStation in there and Nintendo. It was a nice kind of little mix with PlayStation 4 and sometimes even Vita before that and everything, but now it's pretty much all completely turned to Nintendo. So if you're one of these Japanese developers, there is no question at all, you need the Nintendo Switch 2, and many developers actually stated that in their 2025 ambitions for Famitsu, or when they were talking to different outlets. They're very excited to see what the Nintendo Switch is doing, which was completely different from their ambitions from 2016 to 2017, where they weren't really even sure what the Nintendo Switch was going to be overall in the market. Completely changed. So Japanese third-party AAA developers just overall in Japan, they absolutely 110% need the Nintendo Switch 2, and you're going to see that very soon, which is why you're seeing developers like Square Enix say, hey, look, we need to put stuff on Nintendo hardware, and there's already, I would say, credible rumors that Final Fantasy VII Remake, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, and other major titles are going to be heading to the Nintendo Switch 2. So we will definitely see what's going on there as well. But those are my thoughts on why third-party developers need the Nintendo Switch 2, need Nintendo this time around. What do you think? Let me know in the comment section below. All right, guys, that wraps it up for this video here. Thank you so much for watching. I do appreciate it. Please make sure you hit that like button, subscribe if you're someone new, click that notification bell, and check out my other Nintendo Switch RPG content and more right here on screen. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll catch you guys for the next one. Peace.